Dave, you are muted.
Yeah, I'm talking to Sarah.
Oh,
We have some others having trouble.
okay. I just pulled up the link from the agenda.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
what I did too, and it worked. I didn't see any other link. The link that Sarah sent over something else, and it didn't. I couldn't open it, but
Looks like I'm in now. Can you hear me all right?
yep,
Good.
yes,
perfect.
we can.
I found the instructions.
So you came over on the link in the
Yeah.
agenda itself,
Yeah,
right?
which is the way I've done it in the past.
Hmm.
But then there was nobody there for a long time and I thought something was wrong, so I went out and made it back.
I don't know why it's not recognizing my headset microphone. Guess it doesn't matter.
All right, I have to go out and try to get a couple of our board members, so bear with us.
Roger, I know that's not a picture of the Salinas Valley, but it can almost be a Salinas Valley picture.
Yeah, right. Probably the artist does all the valleys in California. This is Sac Valley. It's just Sutter Buttes, in the background there.
So this is the week that they're going to have the golf tournament at Pebble Beach, and just on cue, you start getting some bad weather.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
It should lighten up after today, but then on the weekend they're supposed to get some more, and then it's supposed to, the whole next week could be possibly rainy. So we'll take it. We will take it. And,
Hey, Mike, was
Yeah.
it supposed to be Sarah? Karen and George? Are those the ones we're missing?
I thought I saw George's name on pop up early on.
Yeah, he might have been as an attendee and then got impatient. But all right, let me.
I have Ian, Karen, and George. And
And
Mary
Dave, you
Ann
can hear me now, right?
is the alternate.
Dave? Mike, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
bear
we can
with
hear
me,
you
John.
fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, there's Karen. Yay.
And Lori's trying to get on as well.
Yep. So I'm going to send to George and Ian the agenda because you can always get in that way. So let's see what I can do
Send it to me too, please, Dave.
here. Okay.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. Sorry, I don't know what's going on, but it'll be one of those days. Good
Yeah. Good morning.
morning. Or afternoon, your time. Yeah.
So it is.
Freezing where you are? You DC folks? Yeah.
Not
Nice,
too bad
actually.
though, right? Yeah, it's 48. So
Yeah.
it's a lot warmer than it has been because we were in the highs were in the 20s for quite a few days, and
Yeah, I heard.
with the wind, I don't know if it was over the weekend. I can't remember when this was, but not too long ago, a few days ago, we were having 25-mile-an-hour winds, 11-degree still temperature, and like -5, with a wind chill or more even. But
Yep.
so it was crazy. Pretty wicked. We still have a lot of snow because we had snow and ice out about a foot out where I live, and this was 2 weeks ago, probably, right? I mean, it was quite a while ago, but it's still on the ground. It's weird. The roads are fine because those are cleared, and the heat, the sun on the pavement, everything melted. Those all pretty fine, just fine. But it's we still have.
Sidewalks
Yeah.
still icy.
Yeah,
So-
anything that's wasn't cleared,
Yeah.
is still icy, and certainly the yards are still, icy. But it's for the first time yesterday, we did get up to around 50, and so when you would walk on the snow and ice to yesterday, you actually went through the ice and snow, down. Before we were just skating on top. It was that hard and been that cold.
Okay. We do not have a quorum. Check text messages. Oh, that's right. I didn't send that to Lori, so let me send that one to Lori too. Okay, good. We got George. Hi, George. Were you able, did you use the attachment I sent you? Is that what happened?
No, Sarah sent me something this morning because I
Okay,
couldn't
so
find
that did
anything.
work. Yeah.
There's a new system of how you alert us. And anyway, I ended up on a calendar page
Yeah.
and then clicked on that. And I didn't know that was a system, but I got lucky.
And Lori, go ahead and unmute yourself, or maybe I can unmute you.
Okay, I'm
Lori,
on.
are you? Yeah, you're on. Sorry about all this. We do now have a quorum, so we can proceed. And Lori, if you want to show us your smiling face, I am going to send you really quickly a link to the packet, and on the first page of the packet is a
Yeah, I saw
Zoom.
it, but that link that I know I've been opening. John sent it to me, but that link isn't opening up.
Okay.
Even though I did get all fresh and nice for you guys, but I'll keep trying to get on, but just in the meantime.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, so still no Ian. All right. So, okay, got you in two places, Lori. No problem.
Will
All
it,
right, let's go ahead and get started.
will it be possible to show to show on the screen the materials bill tracking or as we go along? Is that possible?
Yeah.
Because I never got the packet. And I usually always spend some time reading it before the meeting. So
Right. Condense my screen a little bit here. All right. So now we should be seeing all of ourselves on the right of the screen and the agenda packet in the middle. Is that what you're
Thank you.
seeing?
Yes, thank you. Okay.
Hooray. Okay. So we'll call to order. As I said, I'm unsure what Ian's status is. Mike or I don't see Sarah anymore. So Mike, from time to time, check the attendees list and let me know if you see him pop in as an attendee. So the first, there are no corrections to the agenda. And I did see no members of the public. That being said, let's take a look. Still no members of the public. So we can move forward with consideration of adoption of the minutes from November 19th. Here are the minutes. Are there any comments or changes requested to the minutes?
No.
No.
I'll take a motion to adopt.
Okay. I moved adoption.
Second.
Great. And we'll recognize that the mayor's not available, so it passes 2 with an abstention.
Okay.
So moving on to our friends from the frozen tundra. What you have in your packet is the quarterly report and then a tracker. If you did not get a chance to read it, if I'll just reduce this slightly so you can see a little bit more. Roger, we'll turn over to you and Chris.
Recording in progress.
Oh,
I thought I muted myself. Sorry about that.
Yep.
But we can keep this up, or if you would prefer, we've got a sort of a summary PowerPoint I can pull up, and then you can go back to this. Is that okay?
Let's do that. We can.
Sure. Yeah, it's not.
Okay.
It doesn't make sense to try to read it on the screen now.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. Of
Let's
course.
see if I can do that. Let's see here. First, that would help if I could pull it up. Let's see here. 1 second. Where it is. First, let's see. Okay, here we go. See if that. Oops.
There we go.
Okay, good. So it's slideshow. For some reason, this is all in the way. 1 second. Oops. So see if, okay. Can you see that? Okay.
Yep, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
So let me just pull this out 1 second because I need to be able to. Oops. Apologize for this. Just 1 second. So, I'll just go off this. So we've got, we appreciate the opportunity to be with you. What I'm going to do is give you a little overview of sort of just generally set the landscape of, where things are here in DC. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the key priorities for the district. First, just the Congress is in the process of completing FY26 appropriations. They came back with kind of a whirlwind of activity. Just it seems like quite a long time ago since Congress returned to session in early January. They completed all of the appropriations bills, but for one, and that's the Department of Homeland Security bill. That's the only bill that is up for FY26 that's operating under a continuing resolution. And the House and Senate are working through, and really the Senate right now is Democrats on the Senate side are negotiating with the White House on the Department of Homeland Security bill to try to reach an agreement on a bill that could be brought up on the floor before the current CR for the Department of Homeland Security or continuing resolution expires, which it expires day after tomorrow on Friday. So there is not a lot of, hope that that's actually going to occur, but nonetheless, the Democrats on the Senate side who are negotiating for the minority on the House and Senate side are working with the White House to try to see if they can find common ground. There's also an effort in the short term to do a CR just for the Department of Homeland Security bill, an extension bill for at least a few weeks. House leadership on the Democratic side have said they won't support that. So, more to be seen there, but we could have a shutdown in essence of the Department of Homeland Security. Wouldn't impact ICE. It would have limited impact on the TSA, which has funding for staff through the mid March, but nonetheless would be problematic. They're sort of the key things again we'll go into more depth on these as we go forward the slides, but top level permitting reform is going to get some attention. Surface Transportation Reauthorization Bill, Water Resource Development Act, Farm Bill. Looks like reconciliation is going nowhere, which is another vehicle for doing sort of major things, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. And then FY27 appropriations, they want to get that done by the end of the year. Western water legislation, hopefully again, end of the year, progress will be made on that during the year. And again, we'll talk about more details on those as we go forward. In terms of the highlights for the district within these different areas, we're focused principally on a couple of pieces of legislation. One is the FY26 enacted appropriations bill for the Energy and Water Development appropriations bill for the funding bill for the Corps of Engineers. In that bill, there is a little over $14 million that's been set aside for environmental infrastructure nationwide. And the district has had a request to the appropriations process and been talking to the Corps and the San Francisco District Office of the Corps about getting access to some of these environmental infrastructure dollars. And there are some discretionary monies, again, that the FY26 bill does make available that the Corps can allocate to projects nationwide. Not a lot of money, a little over $14 million, but we would like the district would certainly like to be able to get a little bit of money, a couple $100,000 at a minimum to get started on your projects. So we're working to try to advance that cause and make those arguments, and working with the delegation and with the district staff on that, to a table on that. Beyond that, we were talking about more the legislation like the More Water Act. There'll be a hearing later in the month on More Water Act and a bunch of other water bills. And then the Water Resource Development Act for 2026. This is a bill that we'll talk a little bit more about, which is going to have the district has a priority of trying to get some assistance on changing programmatic authority, basically that will allow the district and other non-federal sponsors of environmental infrastructure projects to work with the Corps in a more efficient way through a reimbursement mechanism with the Corps. We'll talk more about that. So
hey,
again,
Roger, back one.
Sure.
Actually, here's fine as well. We do have, Mike has set us a meeting with San Francisco's regional Corps rep for tomorrow.
Great.
So we will reiterate that we're aware of that 14 million. We'd love to be a part of it. Let's get started on a public participation agreement, or whatever the term of art is. And please include us in your work plan. So we'll see what happens as a result of that.
Yeah, and that's great. And then we're following up with Padilla and Schiff's office and Panetta's office. The delegation often will weigh in to the Corps directly and indicate what their priorities are for the work plan. And so they've all been supportive of your request. So and we're asking that they weigh in directly with the Corps too, to reinforce that.
And on WRDA, we wrote a letter. Did the language get included, do you think?
Not yet. The time. Well, we'll talk a little bit about the timing in a minute here, but
Okay.
that's still to be determined.
All right.
So on the again, just high level on 26 appropriations. I mean, it was a good year for the Corps. The Corps got a big increase, almost $2 billion more than what they got last year, and the Bureau of Reclamation took 11% hit. most of our money, does come through the bureau, but the district has historically received. But again, we do have this funding out there through the opportunity through environmental infrastructure with the Corps. That it's not a lot of money again for available nationwide, but we'll nonetheless be making the case that some of those resources should certainly go to the district. I'll turn it over to Chris now. He's going to talk about More Water Act and a couple of the other pieces of legislation and reference the tracker as well, the lead tracker. Chris.
Thanks, everybody. Just real quick, just on the More Water Act, the long name there is the Making Our Communities Resilient Through Enhancing Water, Agriculture, Technology, the Environment, and Residents Act. Part of being in Congress is coming up with long, pithy titles. So that's a part of the More Water Act there. But as you'll see, and this is a bill that came out in the last couple of weeks, and as Roger mentioned just prior, we'll have a Senate Energy and Natural Resources hearing on the 24th. This bill will allow for an amendment to the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, to reauthorize large-scale water recycling and reuse programs. And it will also establish a new water conveyance improvement program. What we've seen is that the bill will grow and reauthorize projects up to $450 million over 5 years. That was the same number that they included for the previous 5-year time frame when it was created for IIJA. It also allows a new program for conveyance, which would authorize projects in a 50-50 cost share, and it's another additional $500 million. And then there's a water recycling extension through the WIN Act, and that would allow for an additional up to $50 million project cap for projects there. And that is a 25-75 cost share. And then if we keep moving on to the next slide, we'll see.
Well, hang on a second, just so directors know that WIN Act, so we, in combination with Monterey One Water, we got $30 million through a series of appropriations. I guess, unfortunately, the project is finished, but there may be a couple of little things that can be done to optimize the project. So I think that we would consider possibly doing another application to the Bureau for Title 16 funding here. Chris did mention it's a 75-25, so it's not completely free money, but there's a couple things we could do to make pure water work better. But we'd have to get Monterey One on board with that.
And just to be clear, it's the 75-25 it's 25% federal, 75% non-federal. So you're going to have to be coming up with the vast majority of the funding. The current cap has actually now been moved up to 40 million administratively, and they did that a couple months ago, and so now it's up to 40 million that could be secured under the existing Title 16 program. And what this would do is codify it up, move it up to 50 million, and then from there on after, it would actually statutorily adjust it based on the Consumer Price Index or a CPI type annual adjustment. So it would go up from there, which is a very good thing. And again, this is would be there is a separate this goes again for projects roughly then up to 200 million or thereabouts or more. There's a separate program, if you had a big bunch of money you're investing, 450 or 500 million or more, I mean, it's 450 or more, you could go for a separate large scale, water reuse program authorization. But in any case, this is much more robust assistance to be available under the current program, which is a good, would, if enacted, would certainly be very helpful.
And then if we go to the next slide, we'll see a couple of legislative items that we're tracking, as well as if you refer to your packet, some of the legislative items that we're following for the district. a few new bills included in that, including the Storage Reauthorization Act, which focuses largely on large-scale water recycling. It focuses on reauthorizing that act itself, and would expand the small storage program as well within there, with a $20 million annual cost for FY27 through FY2033. The extension of the authorization is critical, obviously, to investing in small and sustainable water management, and particularly in regions like the district facing water scarcity and potential droughts. I want to highlight a few different bills we added to the tracker. So the water infrastructure modernization, it's directly relevant for intelligent water systems and groundwater banking. It's a S2388. It's a bill that would bring modernization to water systems and ensuring that water infrastructure is protected in that respect. There's a companion bill of HR 5566 and S3590, which is the Water Infrastructure and Sustainability Act, which provides extension to several different resilience programs. And then I wanted to highlight a bill that we've been tracking for multiple Congresses now, and that's Rep. Costa's Every Drop Counts Act, which actually had a hearing in the House Natural Resources Subcommittee on Water, Wildlife, and Fisheries. And this would modify the small storage program to increase the size cap for groundwater recharge projects, something that we've been following for a while now, and it's finally starting to gain a bit of traction. It would also provide eligibility criteria to ensure more groundwater projects can apply for funding and incentivizing recharge for depleted aquifers. There's a few other bills within, including the Groundwater Technical Assistance Act, providing authorization under BIL that would allow the Bureau of Reclamation to provide technical and financial assistance for groundwater recharge projects. And then you'll see here as well that the Sites Reservoir was approved by the Trump administration for just under $800 million. And there were a couple of different regulatory rollbacks with respect to PFAS. And if we go to the next slide.
Maybe just one other quick thing, and again, just to emphasize, Chris referenced, we talked about it at the last meeting in November, but the Every Drop Counts Act on the House side, that's the Costa bill. Again, the Small Storage Program bill. Again, the Gallego bill on the Senate side that's referenced here is again just how the Senate version of that same bill. So it's getting some traction, and we're very hopeful that that'll be able to move forward. And again, it's expanding this underlying small storage program that, again, in putting it in a place where it'll be much more flexible, or in terms of what resources can be secured through that program, and but we think it'll work, be much more applicable to again the district's needs. Chris.
And as briefly mentioned earlier, the Water Resources Development Act is underway. The California offices closed up their request portals on Friday of last week. We were able to submit the amendment to the Section 219, which would allow for increased federal share of project costs. It would change and not shift anything, but giving an authority or implementation that is already used within the EI authorities, and freeing up folks like the district who have access to Section 219 funds and authorities. And that was submitted to both Senators Padilla and Schiff, as well as Rep. Panetta. That process is going to shift towards committee action when things thaw out here in Washington, D.C., and we head towards the summer months of May through June. And then we can expect sometime in the fall for action to happen there. But as of now, the offices have, in some cases, finalized their decisions, but also are working with both House Transportation Infrastructure Committee and Senate EPW Environmental Public Works to finalize selections for their projects that they will move forward. So we'll learn more of that over the next couple of weeks and months and continue to report back. And I will pass it back.
Yeah,
And,
so
and
just
we,
you
the,
could,
we, the district, did submit letters of support for this reimbursement authority. The theory being, if you consider the way our two state grants for the pure water expansion happen, the money was spent and then you submit evidence to the state and then they reimburse you, which is a far more convenient mechanism that is similar to, I think what we did with the Bureau, Mike, the state revolving fund loans and things like that. So trying to get the Army Corps to kind of come around to that process under the assumption that we eventually get some funding through the Environmental Infrastructure Section 219 program. So go ahead.
and again, just so well, back to your original question too. Again, as Chris is saying, David, the final action, is to be determined. It'll happen in the May, June term. We'll get initial indication May, June, and final action at the end of the year. And now I'll turn over to Chris.
Okay. I like that you anticipate everything with a
That's right.
slide.
So we'll turn over to Chris Kearney now.
So good morning, everyone. Before we get started in a couple of these slides, there's something that I want you to keep in mind that I think sometimes gets lost in a lot of the conversations we're about to have. And I think it's a reason for hope and a reason for a little bit of fear in the minds of some of the congressional leaders. And a couple of numbers to keep in mind. The number 52 is the number of Republican and Democrats who have announced their retirement or pursuit of other office in the House of Representatives. 23 Democrats and 29 Republicans.
Wow.
That's over 10% of the House of Representatives. It is the highest number at this stage in a Congress ever. And when you include the 8 or 9 Senate senators that have announced similarly, that brings you roughly to 60. That puts us on track for perhaps the highest number of retirements, certainly in this century. So that matters because that means that 52 people wake up every morning making calculations that go far beyond the piece of legislation in front of them. Do I come to work? Do I support my leadership? Do I oppose my leadership? Where am I in my primary process? Did I win the primary? Did I lose the primary? Did I, is there a plus the 2 vacancies, of course, where Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia position is open, and then Doug LaMalfa, of course, unfortunately passing away. So when you hear about Republican control is narrow and it's, 1 seat now and it's, maybe up to 3 seats in a while, and the Republicans have 4 seats in the Senate, we're really dealing with coalition government at this point. We're really dealing with folks who are free from their leadership. And that's really an important context here to keep in mind. Quick example of where it's alive and well. Since the start of the administration, because of quick action by Republicans in the House and Senate, they were essentially able to statutorily freeze any efforts to override the president's efforts to levy tariffs. And so the emergency authority that he utilized, the other various authorities he utilized, which should have otherwise normally been subject to legislative challenge, were not able to be because there was about an 18-month or so or a 16-month period that the Congress was able to pass legislation. Well, that date for that legislative pause has expired. And Democrats wasted no time just this week, yesterday, putting a vote on the floor that would start the process for a privileged resolution to essentially roll back the Canadian tariffs. And it's important, the word privilege is important, and it's important to the rest of everything we're talking about here, because it means that a clock starts running and that provision then automatically goes to the House and bumps everything to the side, and then same with what would go to the Senate. So there are forces at work here right off the bat in the tariff space, let alone appropriations, that could have some impacts. 3 Republicans, 2 of them retiring, sided with Democrats to allow that resolution to come to the floor. So, despite heavy White House pressure, where frankly the president's power, just like all presidents, is draining every day, and post 2026, as we turn to 2028, for all of his bluster, for all the things that we've seen, the impact of the White House will short of the very large financial war chest that the Trump organization is sitting on. It's about $350 million he could put towards different campaigns. So he'll maintain that sort of leverage. But the sort of traditional types of leverage that it has, his lame duck status will come to the fore. So tariffs, I can assure you, will repeatedly be an issue, healthcare and so forth. So just keep those things in mind as we're going through some of these slides and beyond, because there are a lot of factors. I think it also will, as we'll speak in a moment, I think there's also reason for hope, because I think that also means that there may be bills that might have spending in them or other things that certain Republican members or even Democratic members might or might not support, or they want to get in line with their leadership. There's a large block of members now across the center of both caucuses that's sort of free to make sure that they leave the lasting legacy. And then, frankly, finally, the last tension to keep in mind is, what about those other, 280 or so members who are seeking reelection, right? Who desperately want certain things to happen, and they have their colleagues who aren't particularly necessarily concerned about that. And so there are real dynamics at work here in the background in terms of both the politics and those numbers that I think are really important to keep in mind as we go through some of these discussions, both reasons for optimism and challenge. So on that point, one of the ones that we care the most about, I'm delighted to report the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee is going to gather up about 20 bills that are of varying types for a hearing on the 24th. Those bills range from, water recycling and conservation, the MOVE Act. We've also got two or three feasibility studies that Leader Thune from South Dakota wants, for example, on the rural water space to potentially start new there. This is particularly notable because the fact that we're even having this hearing is notable because we can tell you from inside the Beltway, the Heinrich-Lee relationship has been cool at best, which is highly uncharacteristic for Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee Chairman and Ranking Member. I have been in town and working with the Energy and Natural Resources Committee since 1989. And I've worked with every chairman and ranking member in some capacity at some fashion, and they've always been congenial. So this one is not. The relationship is not good. Fortunately, at the staff level, it's pretty good, but at the member level, it hasn't been. So it's measurable progress here that we'll have the hearing. I think Chris and Roger may have a different view, but my take is we'll probably see a markup of these bills, but it'll be some time, and the likelihood we'll see sort of passage could well, for the reasons I talked about, could well end up being in a meaningful lame duck. I think you have to, because of the politics, because of the things I just talked about, I think you have to view the calendar in some respects as very tight and short, but longer towards December for folks coming back to lame duck. The Environment and Public Works Committee, by contrast, is a committee chaired by Senator Capito from West Virginia, Ranking Member Whitehouse from Rhode Island. Their politics could not be more divergent, one from a northeastern renewable energy state, if you will, and one from a sort of coal-fired sort of fossil fuel state. They were working incredibly well on a permitting reform bill that was really kind of, think of it as a project certainty bill that would help improve the NEPA process. It was actually, the Chairman Capito's view of this is that her view of permitting reform should go far beyond sort of traditional energy projects. It should include water, transportation, housing, for example. Unfortunately, some of the administration's actions on renewable projects, canceling 5 offshore projects on the Atlantic coast, most all of which have been reversed judicially, but which were sort of a real stick in the eye to Mr. Whitehouse, as well as some other actions in the House, really kind of have sidetracked those conversations for now. We don't know where they go, but I think there's so much appetite. As you can see, the House has actually passed their version of NEPA reform called the SPEED Act. That bill passed with 11 Democrats, even though there were some last minute changes to the bill that really would make renewable energy projects harder to be approved and give the administration more authority. But I think the fact that the Senate and the House are both on this page gives you a really good indication that there's a lot of pent-up demand and desire on both sides of the aisle bicamerally to get something done in this space, and it could benefit water. The challenge, of course, is the calendar and the politics that we talked about. But fortunately, with Senator Padilla and Senator Schiff both on the committee, Senator Padilla actually being a former chairman of the water subcommittee that the more water bill would be referred to, they're on the committee. They can engage Senator Padilla in particular is somewhat free of some of the baggage that candidly Senator Schiff brings to some of the discussions with the Republicans in the White House, as you can imagine. Senator Padilla has both he and his staff, and I can attest to this, have great bipartisan working relationships, both at EPW and a whole suite of issues. So I think there's hope that there will be things that'll get back on track, but I think we're going to have some challenges, perhaps more the calendar, and we can get into that in a little bit more. Next slide, please. I think the way I would just, without go into any of the details, you can read the numbers and we can talk about them. I would characterize this from where we started in January with the DOGE effort, with OMB's efforts on various things, and on the budget, on Russell votes, sort of basically we don't have to spend money that you tell us to, kind of thing, and really a bit of mini constitutional crisis about the power of the purse. I think the overall message from the takeaway from the appropriations process and from the shutdown is that Congress, on a bipartisan basis, wanted to and intended to reclaim their authority and reclaim their role in terms of ultimately what really matters when it comes to money. I think the reclamation number, I would say, is a gigantic few. Title 16, groundwater, Water Smart, they were all zeroed out in the president's budget. Pretty substantial amount of courage for the House Republicans to come back and really, in some respects, repudiate the administration's position on the on reclamation. Certainly, in the case of the Corps of Engineers and EPA, you really saw a unifying force in the appropriations process that reclaimed that authority. And so while there are some real hits in these numbers for reclamation, others this year, as an institutionalist and a longtime DC person, I think we ended the year, broadly speaking, with the institution of the appropriations process in a much stronger position. I will point out that the president signed a number of bills that repudiated a number of things that he put red lines on, the Department of Education's abolishment, for example. So I think going forward, that's a pretty encouraging sign relative to the institutions they bent, but I think they didn't break. And I think it also is an early indication of where his power, the most tangible place you can see his power starting to drain, is he did not draw a line in the sand on these appropriations bills when, in theory, perhaps if he had had different margins or was in a different place, he might have done that. So next slide, please. Here, I think is again, keeping in mind the context that I started off with, I think there are some real opportunities here in terms of both, water infrastructure. I think the overarching point to take away is, regardless of sort of the sort of political challenges, a little bit of the blood in the water, some of the dynamics you'll see on TV on your coverage tonight from the Senate Judiciary hearing, or maybe this afternoon, which was pretty spicy, as we might say. I think water infrastructure is still unifying. It's a little bit like energy historically has been. It's bipartisan. There's a recognition around the WRDA bill, for example. They pride themselves, just like the NDAA bill, as something that they pass every year. I don't think we believe this year will be any different, with the Senator Padilla taking the lead on water and kind of taking up the Feinstein mantle, almost, if you will, and his reputation, as I indicated earlier. I think there's a lot of reason for optimism there. And so I think there's real sign of encouragement because of this hearing and the like. I think the challenges or the risks are the calendar overall for all of this. I think in some respects can get easily sidetracked on tariffs. You get sidetracked on appropriations, depending on how the DHS sort of CR spills into the Senate floor, how long that takes, how much bad will that continues to generate, can eat up precious floor time. So I think with the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee being one of the committees that not only on water, but on permitting reform and other issues, it remains to be seen in what they can do and get across the finish line. I do know that in the case of this stalemate, sort of, if you will, that Republicans and Democrats are facing at Environment and Public Works over permitting reform, the staff level conversations continue. Committee has an idea of what their deadline is internally to get things done. They're on track for a highway bill in March. So what you may find is a lot of work that gets done behind the scenes. There, you could easily see a situation where committees in both chambers sort of huddle up and kind of have what we call pre-conferencing, and then suddenly spring bills out in perhaps July, when people thought things were dead, or September, or November, December always gets a little dicey. But I think the way to think about this is we probably have that 12 months. On the executive branch side, though, I don't think we can underestimate still not only the fallout from the staffing cuts and the DOGE cuts and the impact that that's having on program availability. And that is one place where the administration, the White House continue to work to not really take the foot off the gas with respect to hiring. That's having some real impact. And it's having an impact in sort of two ways. One, there's not the thing that you've read about and heard about continues to be the case, multiple folks carrying multiple hats and that sort of thing. But the other thing that I think is happening that doesn't get a lot of play here is, and this is going to probably affect water grants and the like with respect to certainly with respect to reclamation and maybe even some of the earmark processing. There still remains at the Department of Interior, I can tell you from firsthand, sort of the DOGE effect still. There are folks in the secretary's office, and in fact, in the office I worked in for 8 years, there's a stop, if you will, in an Office of Management and Budget in the secretary's office. That's sort of the final backstop, usually for review of project, of approval of big grant program developments, announcement, big broad things. And they typically leave to the politicals at the assistant secretary level and the director level, kind of the more meat and potatoes, kind of carrying the president's water. And it was not unexpected, setting the DOGE effort aside, it was not unexpected in the first 3 to 4 or 5 months that there would be a lot of slowdown in the processing of grants and loans and the kind of financial side of it, as well as various programmatic things for all the reasons we know. What is a little stunning to us, I think, and unfortunately is probably something that is here to stay, is that even now there are senior politicals at the Bureau of Reclamation, Scott Cameron, of course. You have Dustin Shearer and Andrea Trevek that are in the Assistant Secretary's office. She's a confirmed presidential appointee, right? She's in theory, in fact, she's a close confidant of Governor Burgum. She came with him from North Dakota. So sort of the ultimate politicals have filled into the slots that naturally the normal course of things by late in the first year of an administration, there's a lot of allowing the decision making to divvy back down or devolve back down to the political levels and get out from under the kind of departmental muddling day to day. Well, that's not happening at Interior as recently as a couple of weeks ago. There are IIJA funding packages, if you will, and IRA funding packages that have been scrutinized and vetted 6 ways from Sunday that have been tied up for months. They're still stuck in some places in the secretary's office. While you have budget hearings coming up in the future that may have some impact on that and hopefully have some political pressure to blow their shake, I can't underscore how much the combination of just slim down staffing and multiple folks carrying multiple hats and regions combined with some of this decision making still being at departmental level has really posed a snag. But that's really kind of things that I think the pressure will keep them from getting worse, but they're just lagging in terms of what's compared to what would be historically. I do think with the hearing coming up, with the deadlines, with the 26 work release and possible, although fading discussion of second reconciliation, there's a lot of work to be done, a lot of opportunities here, and a lot of, I think, ultimately positive outcomes, but there'll be a lot of dynamics at work crisscrossing the process that'll keep us all on our toes. So that's all I have, Roger.
Real quick, just yeah, go ahead.
Here's page 3 of today's Herald. I don't know if you can read that. Trump plans to deny Dems grant money. So that goes to Chris's last couple of levels. Now this is primarily transportation and public health, but obviously the favored non-recipients are California, Colorado, Minnesota, Illinois.
Well, the one encouraging thing about that, Dave, though, is back in mid-January, there was a federal court ruling striking down the administration doing just that with DOE grants about 4 or 5 months ago, where they took $7 billion in grant money and revoked it, including some money in California. Yeah. So that judge in a clean sweep threw out, not only, stopped that action and directed it be reversed, but ordered the rescinding of all of those cancellations and all of those cancellation notices, which obviously is still wreaking complete havoc. But at least in the energy space, that's been tested once and failed spectacularly. So we shall see if either side or both have learned from that going forward.
Yeah.
we just have two more quick slides, and I'll just walk through these real quickly. But just as we've talked about, we're going to be working on the work plan for the core, the chasing the EI money that's discretionary at the nationwide that the district could potentially access. We suggest that drafting a letter to in support of the More Water Act. Again, that's something that's going to provide additional flexibility to you in terms of water reuse, and we work with staff to produce something on that. Again, before the February 20th hearing, with tracking, and again, obviously, as we've talked about before, just reporting back to you on the outcome of other bills will be important that will be considered in that hearing. Water Resource Development Act, again, we're talked about the letters that have been submitted, and continuation of that is what we would continue working on that. The advocacy efforts, working with your delegation to seek approval of that reimbursement authority. And then, finally, turning to FY27 is going to get started here quickly. We expect the appropriations process itself again. And so, again, it will need to work with the district on what you would want to pursue in the FY27 process, whether it's a repeat of your 26 request through environmental infrastructure or some other project under that same authority or a project under a different authority. So anyway, these are the kind of issues before us. We'll be working with you and your staff on that. And then just a couple last things, just other developments. Tim Petty was just noteworthy that he was confirmed right before Christmas. And he's a guy who's known well and works on a bipartisan basis with the folks certainly, and known well by us, and is going to be overseeing NOAA and NIMS, which the district interacts with quite a bit. Chris mentioned the passing of very sad and unexpected passing of Representative Doug LaMaffa. He not only chaired the Western Water Caucus, was one of those folks who was a help push forward, drive the water agenda, move things forward, and one of those folks who on a whole host of issues, Forest Service related, wildfire related issues, things of that sort, certainly worked on a bipartisan basis, reached across the aisle to work with folks, and he'll be missed. And then water, I'll just skip down to the Water Smart grants. Again, it's one of those things that, again, has been held up, as Chris said, in this whole review process, this extreme review process that the administration's gone through. But we are hearing positive signs from the Bureau of Reclamation, Department of Interior, that we should expect this whole process to reopen. And there are significant dollars that have already been appropriated that will be available, that the district can consider going after later this year. And if the district is interested in water efficiency grant opportunities or anything of that sort, and again, you're eligible for those to pursue those funds and have taken advantage of these opportunities in the past. If you are considering it for this upcoming round, we would certainly encourage you to, we would like to work with you now, to get ready for those funding opportunities when they do arise. So we'd be happy to answer any questions and turn it back to you, Dave, and the board.
Anything from our directors?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Excuse me. Climate change is still a factor, but I don't see it and hear it in any of your reports. I'm wondering if it's just kind of a dead issue until some of the congressional seats get changed this year.
I'll let maybe Chris Kearney might want to answer this, but I'll just start with one comment. That we still the nomenclature is an issue, on the Hill and with the administration. Don't use climate change anymore, but you could talk about severe weather patterns and impacts and things of that sort. We don't talk about necessarily diversity, equity, and inclusion as much, but we talk about disadvantaged communities and things of that sort. So I'll stop there and turn it over to Chris, and he can maybe add something.
Yeah, I would say for the moment, there's no one talking in those terms because there was so much of that sort of, it's taken on a life of its own, the talk of climate change, Green New Deal, and Biden administration, all this stuff. So it's just no one talks about it. But where there is common ground and where there is a conversation is a recognition on both sides of the aisle, both chambers, that underlies the momentum towards permitting reform. Because in clean energy projects, which is kind of the way folks sidestep talking about climate change, but still continue to advance that agenda, what advocates and supporters for clean energy projects and for transmission, whether it's renewables or wind or hydro or nuclear, there's a widespread recognition, in part because of the spotlight that was brought on climate change and other things during the Biden administration, that in effort to construct the sort of projects that advance, whether it be clean energy or whether it be fossil fuels, that those electrons don't have a sort of C for clean and F for fossil on them when they go through the wires, right? And everybody recognizes that. So part of the reason White House and Capitol are working together is because Senator Whitehouse remains a fiercely strong advocate with respect to climate change and renewable energy and clean energy, which is where he focuses. And so he's passionately committed to doing what he can to make the process better through permitting reform if he can stop getting shot at by the administration. And so that's where it plays out, is the recognition that clean energy projects and the notion of clean energy remains an important part of the economy, remains an important part of the policy agenda of a number of members of Congress. And so it's sort of channeled into away from sort of grants and big grand policy statements and programmatic things, and more focused on sort of targeted legislative efforts revolving around permanent change and talking about matters of climate change. But certainly, I mean, clean energy, but certainly advocates and passionate folks that were strong believers and advocates in the climate change arena 12 months ago have not changed. They've simply recognized the sort of the change in the tone and atmosphere of the folks that are holding the keys at the moment, and are acting accordingly.
And thank you for that and the nomenclature idea. I understand that for sure. Dave, can you respond at all? The Salinas Valley Basin GSA has a much bigger problem than we have on the peninsula. And are they active in this arena of legislation and advocacy and all that stuff?
No. So we've done a lot of outreach to them early on when the base pure water project was trying to evolve, and we were inclusive of the growers. So there were 4 potential infrastructure pieces that they would have participated in, and they took the off ramp off. And now, as they look at their potential solutions, they have lobbying, but they have not been very effective. Now, John and Lori, I know you guys have interacted with them on state level issues, but we have not seen them succeed, other than about 8 years ago, I think Luis got them $10 million to benefit the dam infrastructure.
The dam, yeah.
And then they kind of made some mistakes when there was a surplus of monies available, and Senator Laird reached out to him to do drought resilience projects. So, Mike, I see your hands up. Do you have something to add on that?
Yeah, I think one of the issues in the Salinas Valley is that they haven't had a project or a little group of projects to really coalesce around, and so they're kind of like shooting in the dark. But I think they're starting to get it. I think maybe by the end of the year they're going to have some projects that they could pitch, and I think some of the programs that Chris talked about would be very beneficial for them. So fingers crossed for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious about that. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a comment and a question for Chris Kearney. Well, first of all, thank you very much for that overview.
Hope that wasn't too much detail.
Well,
No,
I mean, it's a lot, but one thing I found particularly interesting was your painting for us a picture of the effect of all these the level of retirements, and how that frees the members to have some degree of independence again, and how that's changing the draining away of Trump's power over the Republicans, how that is changing. So, I mean, I was aware there are a lot of retirements, but I didn't have that picture of how this is changing the dynamic. So I really appreciate hearing about that. A particular question I have is all the wind energy projects that Trump basically tried to blow up, have they mostly been able to get back on track? Do you know?
So 2 answers to that. The 5 projects that in December they declared for national security purposes that they issued stop work orders on, which stretch there's five of them that stretch from Maine to Virginia. And the one nearest to Maine was off the coast of Rhode Island in a pride in project of Senator Whitehouse. So the politics of that seem a little odd if you're trying to, support your Republican colleagues to get permitting projects across the finish line. Why you would blow up projects and actively make mad the guy who could help you on the Democratic side, but the short answer is because those projects, in large part, were so far down the line, the Evolution Project or Revolution Project, the one off the coast of Rhode Island, for example, 85% complete in December. Like they were like turning knobs and laying groundwork. Those folks went to court. It was quickly reversed. All four of the five have been put back on track through legal action. Basically, a combination of wind advocates and the developers involved in those projects went to federal court. In some cases, they did a little bit of venue shopping, but they're all essentially back on track. Basically, the national security argument, just fell short. So in the most visible example, they've been all put back on track to the degree that, and they're in varying degrees of construction or design and so forth. So that was a complete clean sweep in that regard. In terms of the public land, in terms of offshore wind sort of plans and anything that didn't have a permit, anything that was sort of in the burgeoning stages of development, as a practical matter, has been stopped either by slow walking that work or through the executive order. There was a fairly clunkily worded, honestly, if I can say that word, executive order issued with respect to how they were approaching wind. And so for the most part, it is the one single place where the president's personal animus is having, and his authority is having direct impact. And so if you were upstream in the process, you've been as a practical matter stopped. There it is. I will leave you with this, and it's an important question you raise. It is emerging as a centerpiece of the condition of Senator Whitehouse and his Democratic colleagues. They are increasingly being more public that the price of coming back to the table in a formal way for permitting reform is for the administration to take a very specific action, which is to withdraw an executive or a directive, a secretarial directive, basically, that puts the authority on all things wind projects in the hands of the Secretary's office and the Secretary, which is, in other words, that's where all that goes to die. It remains to be seen how much they hold to that, whether or not all the damage has been done. So the administration could do it, in a face-saving way, because there's nothing really left in the pipeline to ruin, for lack of a better term, which is my bet. So stay tuned on that. But the projects that were closest to being finished, that were in the pipeline, the hard infrastructure ones, they're gonna come to fruition. But I don't think you'll see certainly won't see any new starts in any meaningful way under this administration.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I thank you for that. And it sounds like there are Republicans in Congress who, don't share the president's ideological obsession about destroying, blowing up the wind and so
Absolutely.
on.
Absolutely.
Is it your impression that, there are those who are pragmatic rather than ideological about some of the energy issues and realize that we need a diversified sources of energy and more of it?
Unquestionably, and in fact, one of the shining examples of that are the two chairmen of the Committee of Jurisdiction. So Chairman Westerman, Bruce Westerman from Arkansas, who's a forester by background, by the way, shepherded through from the start a permitting reform bill that he partnered with Jared Golden from a Democrat from Maine as the original sponsors of the legislation. And what Chairman Westerman said throughout the process was the bill was only about 30 pages long, and he said this should be a tech neutral bill. This should be a project certainty bill. This should not be one that picks winners and losers. And in fact, he was keenly aware of the concerns of Democrats at the time of developing the bill and going through the markup, that they were very concerned about the administration's actions. And so he actually made sure the language was fairly neutral. And in fact, he put in language that whether you're a renewable energy project supporter or a fossil fuel energy project supporter, I thought was a brilliant piece of language that should have stayed put, which basically said, it was a couple of sentences that basically said any permit that's been issued for any kind of project on DOI public lands essentially can't can't be reversed for political purposes. He didn't quite put it like that, but that was the intent. And if
Uh-huh.
you think, the number of Democratic administrations, like the Biden administration, that's not been particularly fond of fossil fuels and have taken not as draconian, but similar reversal kind of actions as this administration taken on renewables and so forth. You've seen this pendulum swing among administrations. It was perfectly balanced language that would sort of protect all sides. And so there was a lot of that harmonious thinking coming out of House Resources. Unfortunately, at the last minute, the price of passage was some more draconian language towards wind. But the chairman of the committee in the House on the Republican side, as well as his members, same in the Senate with Senator Capito, who comes from a fossil fuel state, who was working very closely with a renewable energy state. The all of the above sort of cliche terminology. A lot of Republican members really, really believe that. They harbinger no, particularly ill will. It's going to, depending on where you are in the country, different sources kind of lean in, right? And so I remain confident that the folks have the right attitude about that sort of thing. It's just, navigating the politics going forward.
Yeah. Thank you. Very interesting.
So we need to move along. 4 real short items on the federal front before we turn it back to the chair for our next item. John and Lori actually highlighted, but Roger, it's kind of your purview, but Senator Schiff and Padilla are hosting tomorrow afternoon a workshop on their CDS programs. So either Mike or I or somebody will attend that. And that's just basically the setup for the community funding projects. Director Paul will be in DC the first week of March or the last week of February.
Yeah, I'm there the February 28th through March 3rd for something else. Yeah.
And are you doing political things, lobbying things?
On March 3rd, I am doing a lobbying thing for Jason,
Yeah, so,
completely unrelated to our work here. Yeah.
Yeah, but just I wanted to pass that along. And then earlier this week, Roger gave me a link to some very interesting NOAA regulatory language. And it turns out that the Cal-Am desal project may need a special use permit for the outfall agreement. Originally, there was some language which would require a special use permit for slant wells filtering seawater through sediment. That got changed a couple of years after it got first put into place, but there remains, and this is only in the Monterey area for National Marine Sanctuary. So we thought it might have been related to deepwater desal, but it's actually related to the Cal-Am project. So Cal-Am is moving forward with its waste discharge permit for the outfall. And then Monterey One Water agreed this week, I think, Mike, you were telling me that they're going to move forward on their coastal development permit for the improvements to the outfall. I think we'll probably raise the federal special use permit obligation on the outfall because it's transporting brine, which you could make the argument is high saline seawater return. And then they would have to address the not conflict, but the fact that a national NPDES permit for the discharge is not the same as a special use permit. So I think it's something that the Coastal Commission wasn't aware of. It wasn't one of their conditions, but we will probably raise it in our comments. And that's it. Well, the fourth item is, will my passport get processed, or is that I'm good in the next few months? Okay.
Gotcha. I don't know. Good luck. Let me know how it goes.
Right.
I need to do the same thing.
That was a good summary, Chris. I appreciate all that too. The same.
So, Mayor, we're on the next item, which is obviously state issues.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks, Ferguson Group.
Thank you.
Okay, John, are you on, or do you want me to take over?
I'll go ahead and get started now. First of all, Chris Kearney, I also enjoyed your presentation. I think a lot of what you had to say obviously has a big impact on California with the number of seats that are up and with the passage of Prop 50. The people that are scrambling around for a possible congressional race. Has a big impact. This obviously is an election year, and though we don't have the big outgo of people that are termed out, I think there's only about 10. There's other reasons why some of these people will be making a move, so that's been having an impact. So,
Can be very interesting.
thank you. That was very good.
Good.
So this is the beginning of a 2-year session, the second year, and it began on January 4th. It's been a very active year because it being a 2-year session, out of the some 2,300 bills that were introduced in 2025, there were over 800 bills that were carried over in the month of January, and those bills have to be acted on, within those first 30 days, or else they die. So we don't still have a complete number of those that made their way through, but it did require quite a few hearings and so forth, and activity. And when you put that on top of the introduction of the bill process, which is going on now, and will come to its deadline next Friday, February 20th. There's the bills have been trickling in, but Laurie always has this to look forward to, is a big dump of bills on February 20th. And so, we usually expect in the second year of a 2-year session, somewhere in the amount of about 2,000 bills introduced. So there'll be a lot more to talk about as far as legislation goes at our next quarterly meeting for the association. So that's been taking up a lot of time in January. The fact that the governor did on January 10th roll out his proposed $349 billion budget. So that's been rolled out. And, because, he is looking at a run in 2028, there was a lot of his politics, in that introduction of his proposed budget and so forth. And now that we have gotten past the hurdle of all the bills that have to make their way in January, the hearing process has begun. Most basically, the sub-hearing process of taking a look at the governor's proposed budget and then making its way to our final budget in June. So Lori will go into some of those details as well. There have been some changes as far as the new chair for the Senate Pro Tem. Senator Limon from the Santa Barbara area has now taken over and made a number of changes as far as chairs and so forth, in the various committees on the Senate side. I think the one that is important to you is that Senator Laird is now the chair for the Budget Committee, and that's a plus. And on the downside, though, we're at a deficit, so there's not a whole lot of money that is out there that can be moved around. In fact, I know on the Assembly side last week, the Democrats got together on a retreat to talk about the budget and what they were going to be looking at as far as possible cuts, and trying to keep some of those needed programs like housing and healthcare and so forth intact. So that'll be part of their work to do as we struggle through this budget. There is a glimmer of hope in that the funding sources, mainly taxes and so forth, have been on the upswing. They continue to be on an upswing. So we'll see how long that plays out for the remainder of this year, and see if there's anything left, for various projects that might be considered at the end of the year. So those are some of the items that are going we're dealing with right now. I know that Lori in particular has been spending a lot of time with you, Dave, and Mike about some proposed legislation that we were thinking of, and we'll see how far that goes, or maybe some other changes to be looked at. And again, I'll let Lori go into those details and so forth. So with that introduction, Lori, I hope I teed it up for you, and you can take it over from there.
Yeah, I may have to backtrack a little bit on some of this. So basically, like as John outlined, globally, yes, we are in a deficit, depending on who you listen to. LAO says 18 billion. The governor says 2.8 billion. But what's really interesting, and it goes back to what Chris was talking about outgoing and incoming, is that when California with term limits, that every 2 years we are getting at least 25 to 30% new members. So we have basically 29 freshman legislators trying to navigate a shell of a budget, and I'll go further into that later. And they're trying to do it in an election year. And in my experience historically in election years is they put the controversial stuff on the ballot and then through the initiative process, which will be updating this committee as they start to qualify for the ballot. But you don't see a lot of controversial bills. They don't want to put marginal members in the position to compromise any slim leads that they have in their districts, despite the fact that the Democrats hold a supermajority in both houses. But what's interesting in this election year, and I'm sure all of you have been following it, is that there's no real clear successor for Newsom. In previous years, it was an heir apparent. We kind of have a hodgepodge of old, displaced, upcoming politicians in the Democrat Party vying for the gubernatorial seat. And
Hey,
there is,
Eric Swalwell lit it up at the Judiciary Committee today. So,
oh yeah, and so did Ted Lieu. But the one who came out, because you have former Speaker and LA Mayor Villaraigosa, you have former congressional member Katie Porter, you have Tom Steyer. We were hoping Javier Becerra was going to run, however, the little lobbying kind of scandal he got caught up in. But it was announced last week is Mahan entered the race, and he is somewhat of the old DC term blue dog Democrat, and mayor of San Jose. So he's really shaken up the race. As John mentioned, Newsom's gunning for 2028. He is not looking back. He is going to try to make this his legacy year, which is for the first time in a while that I've seen that this is a shell of a budget. Usually my budget updates are usually about 8, 9 pages long. This was 2.5. There are not a lot of details, and it's a lot of assumptions. So we have a $350 million billion-dollar budget, and the reserves are still strong. But the takeaways are that it's tight, that there's minimal room for new funding. But this is all really kind of propped up, and I hate to use this term, on a house of cards, because it's being driven by the stock prices and the recent growth of artificial intelligence, and increased revenue in the technology sector. But as we all remember back with Gray Davis, when we had all that money coming in from capital gains and the dot-com, it can quickly collapse. So a lot of these fiscal assumptions are predicated on the future and unknown. And on the flip side of that is we have what's coming down in the federal government. We still really do not know how the big, beautiful bill is going to, and what it does with Medi-Cal and some of the safety net programs of how it's going to impact. And we're talking of all sectors of life. And if I'm sure you read that the Trump administration pulled $600 million of safety net funding from 4 Democratic states. So we're going to start seeing things like this. And also that we have not been reimbursed for any of the federal disaster monies. And so all of these budget pressures, an election year, new members, creates a very tenuous kind of mood in Sacramento of how we're going to navigate it. And so I outlined, pardon me, in my memo, kind of like the major policy areas. The one that I know it's not in our purview is education. The governor wants to bring the Department of Education under his administration. Um, there are more and more fear that a lot of school districts are failing and are going to need to be bailed out, Sacramento City Unified being one of them. And so to kind of get a better grip, he wants to pull the Department of Ed under there. Climate and infrastructure, and this goes into Prop 4. So that was the $10 billion initiative that we passed in 2024. And the hope was, all of us that worked on it, that these were going to be new innovative funds, that we were going to increase funding. But because of the budget outlook, we are backfilling the general fund. So that is where we are. And so it's basically maintaining base level funding for water projects, climate projects. The one that's seen an increase is, of course, wildfire mitigation. So looking at that, you'll see the pockets of funding. Again, it's the $2.1 billion that is going to be allocated this fiscal year is for projects that were normally funded by the general fund. So that's how they count some of their budget savings. Um, so we are working with Aqua, as we have in, since representing the district, um, on some of increasing some of these dollars amount to go beyond what is basically base level expectations of the state that was promised in out multi-year budgets. So we'll continue to do that. There is a big push for water recycling to dump more money into this fund. And of course, dams. Dams and water recycling has been the one that's kind of percolated to the top of the needs for more Prop 4 dollars. So before I go into a legislative update, are there any questions? Okay. So as John said, we are 1 month in. Oh,
Just-
sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Quick question about dams. I thought dams were coming down. I thought dams were, that we're on a trajectory of removing dams. Is that not the case?
Well, you have a lot of angles with the dams. You have some that are being removed to increase watersheds and whatnot, but then you have the dams we can't, and the antiquated infrastructure is frightening. So on some of our weekly lobbying calls of these advocates that represent, I mean, I think just on base level to get them up to standard, and this is beyond Oroville and whatnot, is about close to $3 billion. That the situation of California's existing dams, the ones that will remain, is pretty frightening. But I know that some of the smaller ones you're referring to, Carol, yes, that they are doing that for different water projects and whatnot, and that it's just, or the water flow just isn't enough to maintain those dams. But they are usually the smaller ones, but the big ones we're having some problems with.
Yeah, just to close on that one, Karen. So on the kind of the crossover between state and federal, Sites Reservoir seems to have been green lighted. I mean, it still has its detractors. The Shasta dam raise still seems to be popular enough that it might move forward. I think La Malfa's passing may affect that, don't know. Santa Clara Valley Water District gave up on its San Felipe dam, but they still have to fix their Anderson dam, and there's a lot of support to throw money in that direction. And then even like here locally, our Nacimiento and San Antonio upgrades won't go away, and it's still a priority. The county hasn't figured out how to fund them. So there's kind of this weird thing going on. And strangely, your colleague, Marianne Gawain, had asked me about Los Padres, and is there some information just on the general tenor of, are we in a dam removal era or support dam? And most of the public press out there is removal, removal, removal. And so that's what you hear. But in the arid West, there is a lot of money flowing to either bolster existing dams or get a few of these projects that have been on the books for over 20 years finally built. So it depends where you are and who you talk to. Kind of.
Just if I can just add, Dave, though, what I'm hearing is the reservoir is important for firefighting. And so I'm hearing an opposite view about keep the dam.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because it's also important for having a wetted front in the Carmel River longer. And I think that's really stymied a few of the environmentalists, the fisheries people, like which is really better for fish. So in in my opinion, we need to address it from the standpoint of which is really better for ratepayers right now. Because if desal moves forward and a Los Padres removal moves forward, and all of these things land at the same time, this is going to be a disaster area on the peninsula, rates and charges wise. So it's kind of like, if you're not certain about Los Padres, just leave it for a while we deal with these other rate issues. But anyway, we'll digress a little bit.
So it sounds like there's a big public safety issue with some of the old dams that just has to be addressed, from what Lori said.
Oh, it's a big safety issue. And the one thing, like when Dave was talking about, is the rates. One of the big issues, and John and I have heard it privately, and it's been spoken publicly, and speaker said it's his number one issue, is this term of affordability and all that it encompasses. And so with this, and this will tie into some of our successes of how we use that term affordability, not only with grocery and gas, but what we do have control over is our utilities, our water and whatnot. And so that is really kind of where the legislature is coming from in looking at these projects and whatnot. And if it is deemed that it is unknown, um, then the legislature usually stays off of it, or if you can throw enough doubt. And so, going to the legislative update, as John said, we have a February 20th deadline. The bills have been trickling in, which means my next week or weekend is not going to be a great fun. We do anticipate a lot of bills, but when the speaker took office and President Pro Tem Mark McGuire were still there, they really wanted their houses to focus and on really good policy issues, quit punting up all these bills. And so the Assembly used to be able to introduce 50 bills over 2 years, and the Senate 40. So what they did is they did a hard cap at 35. So gone are the days of, hey, can you just introduce this bill? It'll be a spot bill. We may need it, we may not. Gone are these days that the bills are now gold. They are not given out for free anymore. And so with this, it kind of makes a job easier. But if, in referencing your track, you'll see that a lot of these new introductions, their intent and spot. And so just to kind of phrase it that way, it is that it is the intent to do something. They're still working out the language, but they want a placeholder. They want a bill that will come up early. They still are hammering it out. They will not remain intent and spot. And for those reasons, that they will remain on your track till I see what they're trying to do in that policy space, and in that code section. But one that I'm monitoring closely, and it is kind of a curious fear, is the reintroduction of last year's SB 473, which I know both of you are aware of, by Senator Padilla, that would have basically decoupled water rates. And so this goes back to the affordability argument, is that in our advocacy efforts, along with the Public Advocate's Office, we were successful in basically halting and killing this bill that had an enormous amount of support in not only our very effective uh, background materials, but also in throwing up they're basically arguing that we want to be treated like, investor-owned utilities and electrical. And it's like, when we decoupled, look what happened to them. And that the PUC had done a 10-year pilot project. And those seeds of doubt of that this could increase water rates exponentially was too much for the legislature. And I really want to thank Dave and Mike of really being on top of the materials, and that we were successful in an arena where it otherwise would be like, as I said in my memo, David versus Goliath. It was basically two against a very, very strong statewide association. So, MPWMD, needs to feel very proud of himself, and, you know, we weren't the little dog on the street. So, but with that said, is because of kind of how things went down, authors, or more importantly, it's going to be the proponents and sponsors of the bill, are going to try it again. So that is one bill, and it goes back to these intent and spot bills. Until I see what they're trying to do, I'm going to keep them on your track.
So Lori, you think that could pop in on February 20th?
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think what it would do, if it were me and I were the sponsors, I would put it in as a spot bill and buy myself as much time to for my advocacy efforts and coalition, and then drop the language right when it at the last moment.
Great.
So we will watch for that. It can't originate out of the Senate, because the rule, you can't reintroduce the same bill in the same House in the same legislative session. So we'll be watching for that. And so another legislative issue that we have been working on for the past year, somewhat silently and now very much more openly, is language to clarify AB 1572, which was chaptered in 2023, that would allow MPWMD to enforce authority over non-functional turf. When this bill was originally drafted, it had a litany of entities that could basically enforce. It did not have where our legal, and unfortunately the regional representative for the state water board, really a tight-knit definition where MPWMD would have fit in. However, in our Dave and I working on this last year, and working with Aqua, that they feel, and I agree, that MPWMD falls under two of the, I believe it's
Three.
sub. We get 2 out of 3 that we're able to do it, but where we're at is that it is, it's kind of a legal ambiguity. We feel that we could do it. If we got sued, most likely would win. Aqua thinks we can do it. However, it is not completely, we are not completely carved out like some of the other water agencies and entities that were in the bill. So we try to get this clarifying, as we termed it, a technical amendment, into one of the Senate and Assembly omnibus bills, which they said, no, this is a little bit more significant, due to the fact that this 1572 was not an easy bill, that it was more controversial, and you're expanding the allowable entities, because there are some other entities that, would fall into our technical amendment. So we kind of shelved it for a little bit, and then we brought it back up in November, kind of put together our drafting materials, and reached out to Senator Laird's office, who have been wonderful, and their staff, and we've been really communicating back and forth of what is the district's authority, where can we fit under here. We've had calls with Aqua at the same time, of really kind of drilling down, can we do this, and what is the cleanest, less complicated way to do this. I think I'll let Dave or Mike explain kind of where we are today, because it is, we have had so many correspondence and calls with these entities that it's ever changing. So Dave, did you want to?
Yeah, let me touch on it really quick. It's also the next item on the agenda, so we'll just be done with them all at the same time. for those of you who sat on Water Demand Committee, you'll have heard this before, but the non-functional turf regulation, which affects commercial and institutional, as well as homeowners association, enforcement can begin in 2027. The language that got into the water code allows enforcement by public water systems, cities, counties, or city and counties. Well, they left out special districts, and we were like scratching our heads because there's a number of wholesalers like Metwater who we thought aren't public water systems. We went digging into the 32 or so wholesalers, and it turns out all but 9 have managed to qualify as a public water system. So when they wrote the legislation, they figured they got everybody. Your urban water retailers are typically public water system designated by the Division of Drinking Water, and many of the wholesalers, and this was a Metropolitan Water District bill that ultimately, I think it was Environmental Defense Fund or NRDC carried forward, wrote on, but Metwater, while being a wholesaler, also has treatment plants, which, by the way, as we do too, and that qualifies them as a public water system. So Aqua a year ago said, why don't you pursue that angle? And we thought, what a great angle, because then when we get designated a public water system, that will add a layer of defensibility to our position in the acquisition, because it's been brought up by their side as well. You're not even a public water system. So that was kind of a 2 birds, 1 stone approach last year. And we went all the way up the chain with the Division of Drinking Water, and they still deny it. And this is where Aqua this go around said, yeah, but it's clear to me you qualify. And it's like, well, it's clear to us we qualify, but we're not going to take our Division of Drinking Water to court when they also hold sway over water quality issues and emergency response plans and things like that. So we thought we would do simple cleanup, where we would add the term urban water wholesaler, which mimics the term urban water retailer, in a section of the water code right before the enforcement, and then add urban water wholesaler again. It's already a defined term. And lo and behold, Senator Laird's staffer talked to somebody who said, oh, I don't like that at all. That's going to reopen the whole problem that we had with the bill in the first place. And we thought, this is so simple, and it's mirror language and quite clear. So then Aqua, not Aqua, but Senator Laird's office ran some language that changed it to, and I've got it in front of me, I just want to get the words right, a special district with water conservation enforcement authority. So that would have been added, or it's currently being considered, but it'd be added to those who can enforce. Well, it's not a term that's defined anywhere. It's kind of ambiguous. And Aqua's pushback was, this is going to create more trouble than the previous language. You need to add definitional language. And so suddenly something that looks super clean is now starting to get more ornaments put on it. And we think it's going to add more questions and ultimately result in wasting the time of the staffers in Laird's office, because it'll get blown up. And why do we want to use our one chit to get this language through when we really want Laird's office to help continue to shepherd the CDO modifications through? So as of last night, we were at the point where midday yesterday, we told everybody, Aqua, California Special Districts Association, and Laird's office, we're going to drop it. We're going to back off. Laird's office called back and said, whoa, wait a minute. We don't see this as being that difficult. And we explained all of our sentiments, and they said, well, let's take one last look at everything. So we're actually at the one last look at everything moment. I think our internal view is becoming, well, we may not want to be the first ones out of the gate enforcing this somewhat unpopular policy, but let's go ahead and develop a plan to do that. Under our normal authorities, let's go ahead and enforce. And if somewhere down the road, 3 or 4 years down the road, somebody actually says, well, I finally read the water code and I'm not sure you've got the authority to enforce, then we say, well, let's take it to the courts because we think we are a public water system. We didn't argue the point earlier with the local division of drinking water because we just didn't want to get into arguing it. And that we might, at that point, the court would rule, yeah, you meet the definition of public water system. So we don't know where we're headed other than we know we have broad enforcement authority, and we'll just use that until somebody pushes against it, unless we find a clear way through with this proposed legislation. But as Lori pointed out, it's got to be done by next week if it's going to drop on February 20th. So we're in the last throes of it. We'll report back to Water Demand Committee where we landed in 4 weeks or 6 weeks, whenever that meeting is. But I don't think it'll stop us from enforcing. The one thing to think about is it can be made a win-win with some of the entities if you get them on board saying, you can say you're doing this for resiliency, for the environment, for drought protection, and we've got a little bit of money to help you do a landscape plan and convert it. So we were just hesitant to do any of that work if we didn't have enforcement authority. You got to identify the sites, you got to put a mailing list together, you've got to get materials together. And it was kind of like, well, let's do the easy thing first. Let's get the legislation cleared so we know we have legal authority. And the byproduct of that would be we're also now a public water system, helps with the acquisition. As I said, it's unraveled to, okay, do simple cleanup language that is not simple anymore. So that's a wait and see, but it's a wait and see like 4 days, not 4 months.
And the bill would only get us halfway where we want.
Right. It would clear up the enforcement authority, which we think we have already anyway, and maybe we just enforce and wait until somebody claims we don't, and then clear it up at that time. So, and I don't know if Lori, I took us to the end of the whole agenda by that, or if you had anything more.
Unless you have anything more on the CDO modification.
No, well, yeah, just briefly on the CDO. So we finally, I won't say that I personally blew a gasket, but I came very close because we had asked for, hey, how are we doing? It's been almost 4 months. Can you give us some information? The staffer in charge came back with, well, I've consulted, but we're subject to ex parte rules, can't tell you anything. I brought that a little bit further up the food chain to say, wait a minute, ex parte rules do not prevent you from telling us what the process is. Have we been assigned to the administrative hearing office? Are we still with staff? The law says you're going to give us a hearing. We've said we're willing to waive the hearing if it's going well in our direction, but will it be a hearing or a workshop? Do you have timing? Who can we talk to and who can't we talk to under ex parte? Well, that at least got a response from the chief counsel's office that we will look into it. Almost simultaneously with that, and I mean like 2 days ago, Senator Laird's staffers did the same thing, and they got the we can't tell you due to ex parte rules. So we think we've gotten their attention enough to start work on this. They got one more nugget that we did not get, which was it sounds like they will do a workshop. They said things like, oh, we're just reading the material and the submittals. And of course, our responses that you've had for 3.5 months. But there seems to be some movement there. We have had no fewer than 6, I think, Mike, development projects come in saying, how do we do this project? And for the last 4 to 5 years, we've been very creative with, if it's in Carmel Valley and they had their own water right, you can get CalAm to enter an agreement to wheel someone else's water on their behalf, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of creativity, but we don't need creativity anymore if you're going to be able to set a meter in 3 months or 4 months. So we're very hopeful. I've got a call at noon with Patrick Orozco of the Orozco, his dad built the Target and the whole shopping centers, and he's trying to do a housing project. His end around the CDO is so convoluted, but the title was "Give Me Some Optimism." So everybody they want to hear that the CDO is going to be modified, and we're not there yet. We can't tell them that it is. We can't even tell them when we'll know by. But it's really kind of percolating to the surface, because there are enough projects out there that it won't even get close to solving the housing crisis. But 5 or 6 projects just getting done with anywhere between 70 to 110 units is a real good down payment on building housing. And so we want to get out of the way of that with the ability to set meters. So Mike, you want to add?
Yeah, and just for the committee, just 6 inquiries that these all have happened in the last 2 weeks. And so, if people are inquiring, it'd be great if they're willing to put their thoughts on a piece of paper. We can give them a draft template and send that in as a letter of support. But, these developers need to be the ones that drive this and say, hey, we have remedies. We're really looking forward to do a project on housing or whatever, that let the state know. Don't just keep coming to us and beating us up. We're doing all we can do, and we've done our part. But the state water board needs to hear these concerns versus, telling the district staff. So encourage people to write a letter.
Yeah.
And even how bad our letter writing campaign went, it went great on some respects, like Mid-Penn Housing, which is a low-income developer right away. City of Seaside, we've got 5 cities who've issued letters, which is great. One of them hasn't actually been issued yet, but they promised it. And so the reason for John Laird's interest, of course, is every mayor has come to him and said, you got to help us. We got to build housing. We're running out of time. So his interest remains pretty strong and urgent. But we also reached out to the Chispas of the world, and they said, no, we can't do a letter. Cannery Road Company wrote us a letter, but Avila Construction wouldn't write a letter. So it's been kind of a mixed bag of people in the construction business taking 45 minutes out of their day to just write a letter to somebody where we've given them the template and the address and the email where to send it to. It would be helpful if they'd hear, especially from some of the larger. I mean, if Shea Homes were to make a call, that would be a box to check. Obviously, we're not doing any projects here yet with Shea Homes, but City of Marinas, that's all that housing up there. So anyway, that's the status. It is moving, and we are doing everything we can to poke that along.
Dave, do you see CalAm influence here?
No, I think that the CalAm letter in December made them step back a little bit. But, shame on us a little bit, because it took so long with the PUC Phase 2 decision that was originally supposed to be done in May, got deferred to June, July, August, and you had an August decision that delayed us submitting an application to October. And then you're right up against Thanksgiving and Christmas with state employees. And then a CalAm letter goes in the week before Christmas, and then they had to absorb that when they got back after the new year. So I understand the pace of play. I don't believe that CalAm is lobbying and succeeding. I did have a very short but honest conversation with the deputy director, so the former water rights director, but he got bumped up. And so his replacement is now ostensibly in charge of our process, but he was that guy. And I just called him because I got a call from a lobbyist, which will just go unnamed, who said, I'm outraged that the governor's thing is housing and the state water board's not moving fast enough. And then you get this letter from CalAm that says, don't do it. Would you like our services? Well, their services would have been about 15 grand retainer for 5 months ish. And then you have the added problem or discomfort of asking for someone to go around to do your bidding when we'd rather walk right through the front door because we think we did our pregame work by meeting with every board member multiple times, every staffer multiple times. Just didn't want to bring in, another lobbyist in for a one-off thing just because they've got access to the governor. So when I called Eric Ekdahl on that, he was really equivocal about whether it would help us or hurt us. So we made the decision to just avoid it because it wasn't my first choice. And I didn't hear that it was going to break the logjam, but they were pretty clear that Cal-Am wasn't part of the logjam. That Cal-Am's had so much recent disarray with Kevin Tilden leaving in November, new president coming on, doing her visits through December, and then they sent off their opposition letter, which was not well crafted or quite accurate. I just think it's the normal bureaucratic thing, and we're not the biggest fish in the California water world. I mean, they've got Bay Delta hearings and a few large Sigma, groundwater issues that are going to have to get resolved, but they're getting to us.
They better.
Yeah. Yep.
But
well, this was a little longer than we want to plan our meetings for. I apologize for the issues in getting everybody to be able to get in early, or on time rather. Sarah's house had flooding, and so she had a contractor that finally scheduled this morning to come in. So she was able to start the meeting, but then I'm the second person in charge of the meeting, and then I realized my limitations on moving people over. But thanks for endurance to almost a 2-hour meeting.
Yeah, it's been long. I just want to take 1 second to say thank you that the lobbying on the decoupling issue, that's a really important issue for ratepayer protection, and I want to thank Lori and Mike and Dave for the work you did on that. And it's nice, isn't it, once in a while to win one of those David and Goliath fights. Now, the PUC opposed the decoupling. Is that, as I recall, no? They didn't.
Yeah, no, they have. And, they finally said, okay, they did a pilot with 6 investor-owned.
Yeah.
And 2 of which were really the same company, but in different locations. And then after
just wondering if they played any significant role in the lobbying or not, because
no. So that they finally did, but their problem was when it first came to the Senate Water Parks and Wildlife, they didn't have a Sacramento lobbyist on the PUC. The Public Advocate's Office got their communication into the portal late, so it wasn't seen by any of the committee members, and they didn't have anybody at the committee hearing. And so all of the proponents, who are some very good fiction writers, managed to speak in favor of it. And I don't know how big that committee is, but it's got to be at least 16, 18 people. And they're like, wow, this sounds great. So they moved it on, and then it went to Senate Appropriations. And by then, the PUC weighed in with not public advocates, but PUC lobbying, saying, hey, this is going to cost us $400,000 a year to staff up for.
Yeah.
I wish they had picked a higher number, like $1 million, but so they entered opposition. But the Public Advocate's Office then were able to get their information filed.
About the
ratepayer. Appropriations still passed it and moved it over, and it came to the Assembly. By then, we had our act in gear. That's when we had let's face it, having a person there, even to say me too, but also to communicate with the new Public Advocates lobbyist, to say, hey, we're both kind of, throw ideas off each other. It was helpful. And then, as Lori pointed out, our letter was pretty thorough. And I think and I've heard back through back channels that people were a little shocked at the amount of work we put into it. Because when you open up and say, oh, your assembly district, your assembly district, your assembly district, you know, you're going to be aiding and abetting this thing that will affect, could be tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. But it's not just a feel good that this will help somebody I don't know or hurt somebody I don't know. That it actually had some effect.
So it sounds like we really played an important role, especially given the weakness of the thin opposition from anybody else. Yeah. So
yeah.
Thank you very much for all your efforts.
Mhm.
Great. As I said, sorry about the length of this meeting, but thanks for everybody enduring. Got to get on to another call here.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank
you so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.